Your support fuels this channel. When you subscribe, you never miss new content that I create specifically with you in mind. Your comments not only help this video reach more people, but they actually shape what I create next. I read every single one. Hitting that like button takes just a second of your time but makes a massive difference in helping others discover this content. Plus, the more you engage, the more I can deliver the exact content you want to see. Let's keep building this community together. Subscribe, comment, and like today. The champagne in Robert's glass had long gone flat, much like his spirits. From the balcony of his penthouse, he stared at the city lights below, a billion-dollar empire at his feet, yet he felt nothing but hollow emptiness. The text message on his phone glowed with a cruel light. "Sorry, Robert. I never loved you. I only wanted your money. James and I are leaving for Paris tonight. Goodbye." Serena, the woman he had left his wife for, had taken everything. Not just his trust and pride, but also his business plans for the upcoming merger. She had been feeding information to James, his biggest competitor, for months. Now they were gone, along with his company's trade secrets and $10 million transferred from one of his offshore accounts. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound he had ever felt. Robert threw the champagne glass against the wall, watching it shatter into 1,000 pieces. Much like his life had done when he'd foolishly walked out on Sarah 5 years ago. Sarah, his college sweetheart, his partner of 15 years, the woman who had stood by him when he had nothing but dreams and determination. The woman who was now married to Thomas Chin, the respected CEO of Global Tech Solutions. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had everything a man could want: mansions, private jets, yachts, an empire worth billions. Yet the only thing he truly desired was the one thing his money couldn't buy: a second chance with the woman he had so carelessly discarded. Rain began to fall, matching the storm inside him. Robert didn't move to go inside. Instead, he let the rain soak through his expensive suit, hoping it might wash away some of his regret. It didn't. His phone rang. It was Michael, his lawyer and oldest friend. "The board wants an emergency meeting tomorrow morning," Michael said, his voice tight with concern. "The leaked information has hit the market. Stocks are dropping. Robert, this is bad." "I know," Robert replied, his voice sounding strange even to his own ears. "I'll be there." "There's something else," Michael hesitated. "I saw Sarah today. At the Children's Hospital charity event." Robert's heart skipped a beat at the mention of her name. "How is she?" "She looked happy, Robert. Really happy. Thomas announced a $50 million donation to build a new children's wing. They're naming it after Sarah's mother." The news hit Robert like a physical blow. The Children's Hospital had been Sarah's passion project for years. She had wanted to build a wing in her mother's memory, her mother who had died of cancer when Sarah was just 12. Robert had always promised to help her make it happen, someday, when they had enough money. But somehow that day never came, despite his growing wealth. And now Thomas had done what Robert should have done years ago. "Robert? Are you still there?" Michael asked. "I made a mistake, Michael," Robert whispered, the admission torn from somewhere deep inside him. "The biggest mistake of my life." "Which one?" Michael asked quietly. "Leaving Sarah or trusting Serena?" "Both. But mostly Sarah. I need to see her." "Bad idea, Robert. She's married. Happily married from what I can tell. I just need to talk to her. To apologize. To..." Robert trailed off, not sure what he wanted to say. To beg her to come back? To tell her he still loved her? That he'd never stopped loving her? "Don't," Michael warned. "You had your chance. You blew it. Let her be happy." But as Robert ended the call, he knew he couldn't let it go. He had to see Sarah one more time. He had to tell her the truth, that walking away from her had been the worst decision of his life. That despite all his wealth and success, he was nothing without her. Tomorrow, after the board meeting, he would find a way to see her. He had to try, even if it was just for closure. Even if it was just to say he was sorry. Little did Robert know that fate had other plans, and the path back to Sarah would be far more complicated than he could have imagined. The board meeting was going exactly as badly as Robert had expected. 14 stern faces stared at him from around the mahogany table, their expressions ranging from disappointment to barely disguised anger. The quarterly reports projected on the screen behind him showed sharp downward trends, the immediate result of Serena's betrayal and the leaked information. "The merger with Easttech is now completely off the table," said Victor, the head of the board. "They've signed with James instead. We've lost nearly $200 million in potential revenue, not to mention the 20% drop in stock value since the news broke this morning." Robert nodded, accepting the criticism. There was nothing to say in his defense. He had been foolish, blinded by Serena's false affection and his own ego. "The board has concerns about your judgment, Robert," Victor continued, his voice level but with an edge of finality. "This isn't just about the affair. It's about bringing someone with no clearance into confidential meetings, giving them access to sensitive information, failing to perform due diligence." "I understand," Robert interrupted. "And I take full responsibility." "Good," Victor said. "Because effective immediately, we're asking you to step down as CEO while we conduct a full investigation." The words hit Robert like a physical blow, but he had been half expecting them. Still, the reality of being removed from the company he had built from nothing was devastating. For 20 years, Westfield Enterprises had been his life, his identity, his purpose. "Richard will serve as interim CEO," Victor continued, nodding toward Richard Delacourt, Robert's COO. Richard had the decency to look uncomfortable with the promotion under these circumstances. "I understand," Robert said again, standing up. "I'll have my office cleared by the end of the day." "That won't be necessary," Victor said. "Take whatever time you need. But we'll need your company phone, laptop, and access cards before you leave today." Robert handed over his company belongings with as much dignity as he could muster. He refused to let them see how deeply this cut. As he prepared to leave the boardroom, Richard approached him. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I voted against this decision." "Thank you, Richard. Take care of my company." "I will. And Robert, I hope you can fix whatever's going on in your personal life too." Robert nodded, not trusting himself to speak further. He walked out of the boardroom with his head held high, though inside he felt completely adrift. In the span of 24 hours he had lost his girlfriend, his company, and much of his fortune. The stock price drop had cost him billions on paper. As he walked toward the elevator, he passed his former secretary, Emily, who looked at him with sympathy. "I heard what happened," she said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Westfield." "Thank you, Emily." "I thought you might want to know," she added hesitantly. "Mrs. Chin, Sarah, called earlier today. She said she heard about what happened with Serena on the news and wanted to make sure you were all right." Robert's heart leapt. "Sarah called? Did she leave a number?" Emily shook her head. "No, she just asked me to tell you that she was thinking of you." The simple message meant more to Robert than Emily could possibly understand. After everything he had done, after the way he had ended their marriage for Serena, Sarah had still called to check on his welfare. It was so typical of her, kind, thoughtful, caring about others even when they didn't deserve it. "Thank you for telling me," he said. As Robert left the building that had been the center of his professional life for 2 decades, he felt strangely light. The loss of his position hurt, of course, but it had also clarified what truly mattered. For too long he had defined himself by his wealth and success. He had sacrificed his marriage on the altar of ambition and ego, convinced that he deserved someone younger, more glamorous, someone who would be impressed by his money and power. But Serena had never loved him. She had only loved what he could give her, the luxury, the status, the lifestyle. And in the end, even that hadn't been enough. She had wanted his company secrets too. In his car, Robert sat for a long moment before starting the engine. He had been planning to find a way to see Sarah, to apologize, maybe even to try to win her back. But Emily's message had changed things. Sarah had reached out to him, not to gloat over his downfall, but out of concern. Perhaps there was still a chance to make things right between them. Not to win her back. She was married to Thomas and Robert had to respect that, but at least to make peace, to apologize for the hurt he had caused, to thank her for being the person she was. He started the car and pulled out of the executive parking spot that was no longer his. He had no plan for what he would do next, where he would go, how he would rebuild his life. But for the first time in years he felt like he was heading in the right direction. The rain fell in sheets as Robert sat in his car outside the children's hospital, gathering his courage. He'd learned through a quick internet search that Sarah would be here today for a planning meeting about the new wing being funded by her husband. It had been 3 days since his removal as CEO, 3 days of soul-searching and painful reflection. His phone had been ringing constantly, reporters wanting statements about the scandal, business associates distancing themselves, lawyers discussing the impending lawsuits. He had ignored them all, focusing instead on what he needed to say to Sarah when he finally saw her. Finally, Robert got out of the car and jogged through the rain to the hospital entrance. The lobby was bright and welcoming, with colorful murals on the walls and a volunteer at the information desk who smiled at him as he approached. "I'm here for the planning meeting about the new wing," Robert said. "The Chin donation." The volunteer checked her computer. "That's on the 5th floor, conference room C. Are you with the architectural team?" Yes, Robert lied, feeling a twinge of guilt. Thank you. As he rode the elevator up, Robert rehearsed what he would say. A simple apology seemed inadequate after all he had done, yet anything more might seem like he was asking for something he had no right to ask for. The elevator doors opened and Robert stepped out, following the signs to Conference Room C. Through the glass wall, he could see a group of people gathered around a large table covered with blueprints. And there she was, Sarah. Even from a distance, the sight of her made his heart ache. Her dark hair was shorter now, falling just below her shoulders instead of down her back as it had been when they were married. She was gesturing at something on the blueprints, her face animated with enthusiasm. Robert stood frozen, suddenly unsure if he should interrupt. This was her moment, her project. What right did he have to intrude? As he turned to leave, the conference room door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, distinguished, with silver streaks in his dark hair. Thomas Chin. Robert recognized him from news photos and business magazines. The two men nearly collided. Excuse me, Thomas said, then did a double take as he recognized Robert. Mr. Westfield? Robert Westfield. Robert nodded, feeling caught. Mr. Chin. I apologize for the intrusion. I was just leaving. Thomas studied him for a moment, his expression unreadable. You're here to see Sarah. It wasn't a question. Robert nodded again, not seeing any point in denying it. She mentioned that you might reach out after what happened with your company, Thomas said. He didn't sound angry, merely thoughtful. She was concerned about you. That sounds like Sarah, Robert said quietly. Always thinking of others, even those who don't deserve it. Thomas seemed to make a decision. Come with me, he said, leading Robert to a small waiting area down the hall from the conference room. She'll be in meetings for another hour. We can talk until then. Robert followed, surprised by the offer. He had expected hostility from Sarah's new husband, not this calm civility. They sat in two comfortable chairs, separated by a small table with magazines. For a moment, neither spoke. I love my wife very much, Thomas finally said, his voice gentle but firm. She's the most remarkable person I've ever known. Yes, Robert agreed. She is. When we met, she was still healing from the end of your marriage, Thomas continued. It took time for her to trust again, to believe that not everyone would leave when things got difficult. The words were like a knife to Robert's heart, but he didn't flinch from them. He deserved this reminder of the pain he had caused. I didn't come to cause trouble, Robert said. I just wanted to apologize to her. To tell her that losing her was the biggest mistake of my life. Thomas nodded, unsurprised. And do you think that will help her? Or is it just to ease your own conscience? The question caught Robert off guard. He hadn't considered that his apology might be selfish, just another way of centering his own feelings and needs. I don't know, he admitted. I just know that I owe her the truth. That I was wrong, that I know it, and that I'm sorry. Thomas studied him for a long moment. The man described in the tabloids, the ruthless businessman who left his wife for a younger woman, who's now been betrayed himself. That's not who you really are, is it? The question surprised Robert again. I made choices that I deeply regret, he said carefully. I let success change me, not for the better. But no, that's not who I want to be. Thomas nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. Sarah always said there was more to you than what people saw. That underneath the billionaire persona was the same man she fell in love with in college. Idealistic, kind, passionate about making a difference. She always saw the best in me, Robert said, his throat tight with emotion. Even when it wasn't there to see. It was there, Thomas said. It still is, I think. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. Before Robert could respond, the conference room door opened and people began to file out. Sarah emerged last, talking with an architect. She looked up, saw Thomas, smiled, and then saw Robert. Her smile faltered, her eyes widened with surprise. She excused herself from the architect and walked toward them, her expression guarded but not hostile. Robert, she said when she reached them. Emily said you might call. I didn't expect to see you here. I'm sorry for showing up unannounced, Robert said, standing. I just needed to see you. Sarah looked at Thomas, who smiled reassuringly at her. I'll give you two some privacy, he said, touching her arm gently. I need to call the office anyway. As Thomas walked away, Sarah turned back to Robert. You look terrible, she said, but there was concern in her voice rather than criticism. It's been a rough week, Robert admitted with a weak attempt at a smile. I heard. I'm sorry about Serena. And the company. That's a lot to lose at once. I lost something far more important years ago, Robert said quietly. You. Sarah's expression softened slightly. Robert, please let me say this, he interrupted gently. I know you're happy with Thomas. I can see that, and I'm not here to disrupt your life. I just need you to know that I was wrong. About everything. About what matters, about what makes a life worth living. I threw away something precious for something that turned out to be completely worthless, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. Sarah was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Why now? She finally asked. Because Serena betrayed you? Because you're suddenly alone and unhappy? The questions were fair, and Robert didn't flinch from them. Those things forced me to look honestly at my life, yes. But this isn't about trying to get you back. I know that's not possible. This is about finally telling you what I should have said years ago, that I'm sorry. That I know the pain I caused you was unforgivable. That you deserved so much better. Tears glimmered in Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them away. Thank you for saying that, she said softly. It means more than you might think. They stood in silence for a moment, the years between them filled with unspoken words, paths not taken, choices that couldn't be undone. The hospital wing, Robert finally said. It's wonderful that it's finally happening. Your mother would be so proud. Sarah smiled, a real smile this time. Yes, she would. It's been a dream of mine for so long. Thomas is a good man, Robert said, meaning it. He sees your worth. He supports your dreams. He's what I should have been. He is a good man, Sarah agreed. But you know, Robert, so are you. You just lost your way for a while. Her forgiveness, so freely given when he least deserved it, nearly undid him. Thank you, he whispered, unable to say more past the lump in his throat. Thomas returned then, his timing perfect as if he had been watching from a distance. Did you ask him yet? He said to Sarah. She shook her head. I was just about to. She turned back to Robert. We're forming a board for the new children's wing. People who can help with fundraising, awareness, connections to the community. I'd like you to consider joining us. The offer stunned Robert. Me? After everything? You've always been good at motivating people to give money, Sarah said with a small smile. And this would be putting that talent to good use. I don't know what to say, Robert admitted. Say yes, Thomas said, surprising him again. Sarah's right. Your skills could help a lot of children. Robert looked between them, these two generous souls who were offering him not just forgiveness but a chance at redemption, a way to be part of something meaningful. Yes, he said finally. Of course. I'd be honored. As they walked together toward the elevator, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time, hope. Not hope that he could win Sarah back, but hope that he could find a way forward, that he could become someone worthy of the faith she had always had in him. It wasn't the outcome he had imagined when he came here today, but somehow, it felt right. It felt like the beginning of something, not the end. 2 months had passed since the hospital meeting. Robert sat in his new office, a modest space compared to his former CEO's suite, but comfortable enough for his current needs. On the wall hung a framed photograph of the groundbreaking ceremony for the Children's Hospital wing, with Sarah, Thomas, and himself among the group wielding ceremonial shovels. Next to it was the latest headline from the business section. Westfield launches new foundation for children's healthcare. The investigation into Serena's corporate espionage was ongoing, with international authorities still trying to track her and James down. Robert had cooperated fully, providing all the evidence he could. His reputation in the business world remained tarnished, but he found that he cared less about that with each passing day. His phone rang, his personal phone, not a company line. The display showed Michael's name. The SEC is closing their part of the investigation, Michael said without preamble when Robert answered. They've concluded that you were a victim, not a conspirator. That's one hurdle down. That's good news, Robert said. Any word on when I might get access to the frozen accounts? Another few weeks, possibly. The good news is that they were able to recover about $4 million of the stolen 10. Serena and James spent the rest before they were flagged. That's something at least. $6 million was a substantial loss, but given the billions he still had in other accounts and investments, it was hardly a financial crisis for him personally. How's the foundation work going? Michael asked, his tone shifting from lawyer to friend. Good. We've secured commitments for nearly $30 million in the first funding round. Not bad for 2 months of work. You sound different, Michael observed. Happier. I am, Robert admitted. It's strange. I lost my company, got publicly humiliated, and had millions stolen from me, and somehow I'm happier than I've been in years. Because of Sarah? Michael asked cautiously. Robert considered the question. Sarah was certainly part of it, Working with her on the hospital board had rekindled their friendship, if not their romance. But it was more than that. Partly, he said. But it's also about finding purpose again. The foundation work feels meaningful in a way that making more money never did. Just be careful, Michael warned. She's still married. I know that, Robert assured him. Thomas and I have actually become, well, not friends exactly, but something like it. I respect their marriage, Michael. I'm not trying to interfere with it. It was true. The three of them had developed an unexpected dynamic over the past 2 months. They worked well together on the hospital project, each bringing different strengths. Thomas had connections throughout the medical community and a genuine passion for improving children's healthcare. Sarah had the vision and the personal connection that made donors open their checkbooks. And Robert had his business acumen and his newfound desire to make amends, to do something good with his wealth and influence. After saying goodbye to Michael, Robert turned his attention back to the proposal on his desk. A plan for a cutting-edge pediatric research facility that would work in tandem with the new hospital wing. It was ambitious, requiring significant funding beyond what they'd already raised, but Robert believed it was achievable. A knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. Looking up, he was surprised to see Thomas standing there. "Do you have a minute?" Thomas asked. "Of course," Robert said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Is everything all right? Did something happen with the hospital project?" Thomas sat down, his expression serious. "The project is fine. This is about Sarah." Robert's heart skipped a beat. "Is she okay?" "She's fine physically," Thomas said. "But emotionally, that's another matter." "I don't understand." Thomas sighed, looking uncomfortable. "This is difficult for me to say, but I believe in being direct. Sarah is still in love with you, Robert." The words hung in the air between them. Robert stared at Thomas, sure he had misheard. "That's not possible," he finally said. "She's married to you. She's happy with you." "She loves me," Thomas corrected gently. "But she's in love with you. There's a difference. She's tried to hide it even from herself, but I've known for some time now." "Did she tell you this?" Robert asked, still struggling to process what Thomas was saying. "Not in so many words. But I know my wife. I see how she lights up when you're around, how she talks about you when you're not. The passion in her voice when she describes the work you're doing together." "Thomas, I swear to you I've never—" "I know," Thomas interrupted. "You've been respectful of our marriage. I've watched you maintain boundaries even when it was clearly difficult for you. I appreciate that more than you know." Robert ran a hand through his hair, feeling completely out of his depth. "Why are you telling me this?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. "Because I love Sarah enough to want her happiness above my own. And because I need to tell you something else, something I've kept private until now." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper, which he handed to Robert. It was a medical report. "I have a rare form of early-onset Alzheimer's disease," Thomas said quietly as Robert scanned the document with growing horror. "The progression is expected to be rapid. Within a year, possibly 2, I likely won't recognize Sarah anymore. Within 3, I'll need full-time care." "My God, Thomas," Robert whispered. "Does Sarah know?" "Not yet. I've been waiting for the right time to tell her, but there never seems to be one." Thomas's voice was steady, but his eyes revealed his pain. "She's already lost so much in her life, her mother to cancer, her father to a stroke. And then you left her." The reminder of his abandonment stung, but Robert didn't flinch from it. "And now you'll be leaving her too in the cruelest way possible." Thomas nodded. "Which is why I need to know your intentions, Robert. Not just your feelings for her, but what kind of man you are now. Whether you're someone who will stay this time, who will be there for her through what's coming." The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Robert took a deep breath. "I love her," he admitted, saying aloud what they both already knew. "I never stopped loving her, even when I foolishly walked away. These past 2 months, working alongside her, seeing the woman she's become, it's only deepened those feelings." "And if you had a second chance?" Thomas pressed. "Would you make the same mistakes?" "No," Robert said firmly. "I know now what truly matters. It's not wealth or status or having a young woman on my arm. It's connection, purpose, making a difference. It's the way Sarah looks when she talks about helping children, the passion she brings to everything she does." Thomas studied him for a long moment, then nodded, seemingly satisfied with what he saw. "I'm going to tell Sarah about my diagnosis this weekend. I wanted to speak with you first to understand where things stand." "What exactly are you asking me to do, Thomas?" Robert asked, still trying to make sense of this extraordinary conversation. Nothing for now, Thomas replied. Just continue being her friend, supporting her work with the hospital. She'll need that more than ever in the coming months. He paused. But when the time comes, be there for her. Be the man she always believed you could be. Robert felt humbled by Thomas's selflessness, his dignity in the face of such a devastating diagnosis. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Thomas said, standing up. Just think about what I've said. And Robert, don't tell Sarah we had this conversation. She needs to process my diagnosis without any additional complications. As Thomas turned to leave, Robert called after him. Thomas, I'm truly sorry about your diagnosis. Is there anything I can do? Any specialists we should consult? Any treatments we should explore? Thomas smiled sadly. I've seen the best neurologists in the country. The disease is rare and aggressive, with limited treatment options. But thank you for asking. He paused at the door. Take care of her, Robert. When the time comes. After Thomas left, Robert sat at his desk for a long time, the medical report still in his hand. The situation was almost too much to comprehend. Sarah still loved him, Thomas was dying, and somehow Robert had been entrusted with Sarah's future happiness. It was a responsibility he had once proven himself unworthy of. But he was a different man now, humbled by failure, awakened to what truly mattered. If given a second chance with Sarah, not now but someday after she had grieved and healed, he would cherish it in a way his younger self never could have. For now, though, all he could do was be there for both of them as Thomas's diagnosis became public, as Sarah faced yet another loss, as the future they had all imagined transformed into something none of them had expected. Robert picked up the proposal for the pediatric research facility, determination renewed. This work mattered. It might not save Thomas, but it would save many children. And perhaps, in some small way, it would help save Robert too, not just his reputation but his soul. The autumn leaves swirled across the hospital courtyard as Robert waited on a bench, checking his watch. Sarah had called an hour ago, asking to meet him here rather than at the foundation office. Her voice had sounded strained, and Robert knew immediately what it meant. Thomas had finally told her about his diagnosis. 3 days had passed since Thomas's unexpected visit to Robert's office. 3 days during which Robert had researched everything he could about early-onset Alzheimer's, contacted specialists around the world, and tried to prepare himself for what was coming, not just for Thomas but for Sarah. He saw her approaching now, her face pale, eyes reddened from crying. Robert stood, his heart aching for her pain. "Thank you for meeting me," Sarah said when she reached him. "I needed to get out of the house for a while." "Of course," Robert said gently. "Would you like to walk? Or just sit here?" "Let's walk," Sarah decided. "I can't seem to stay still today." They fell into step together, following the winding path through the courtyard. For several minutes neither spoke. Robert waited, giving Sarah space to talk when she was ready. "Thomas told me," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "about the Alzheimer's." "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Robert said, the words inadequate but sincere. She looked at him sharply. "You knew?" Robert hesitated, remembering Thomas's request not to mention their conversation. But he couldn't lie to Sarah. "Yes. Thomas told me a few days ago." "Why would he tell you before telling me?" Sarah asked, confusion and hurt evident in her voice. "He wanted my assurance that the foundation work would continue, that the hospital project wouldn't be affected by his situation," Robert said, bending the truth slightly to protect both Sarah and Thomas. Sarah seemed to accept this explanation. "He's been hiding it for months," she said, anger creeping into her voice. "Going to appointments alone, making excuses for memory lapses, planning for a future he knew he wouldn't have. How could he keep something so important from me?" "He was trying to protect you," Robert said gently. "To spare you pain for as long as possible." "It's not his job to protect me from the truth," Sarah said, tears welling in her eyes again. "We're supposed to face things together. That's what marriage is." Robert remained silent, not feeling qualified to comment on what marriage should be, given his own failure at it. They walked in silence for a while longer, autumn leaves crunching beneath their feet. The hospital rose before them, its windows reflecting the late afternoon sun. "He wants to step down from the hospital board," Sarah said finally. "He says he wants to enjoy the time he has left, before the disease progresses. Travel, see the world, make memories while he still can remember them." "That sounds reasonable," Robert ventured. "It does," Sarah agreed. "Except he wants to go alone." Robert stopped walking, surprised. Alone? Without you? Sarah nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. He says he doesn't want me to see him decline, doesn't want me to remember him that way. He's arranged for care at a specialized facility in Switzerland when the time comes. He's made all these decisions without me, Robert? As if my feelings don't matter. Robert guided her to a nearby bench and they sat down. He offered her his handkerchief, which she took with a murmured thanks. Have you told him how you feel about all this? Robert asked. I tried. We were up all night talking. Or rather, I was talking, pleading, crying, and he was just calmly explaining his decisions, as if they were business arrangements instead of our life together. Sarah dabbed at her eyes. He keeps saying he's doing what's best for me, but how can abandoning me be what's best? The parallel to Robert's own abandonment of Sarah years ago wasn't lost on him. The irony was bitter. Sarah, twice left by men who claimed to love her, both believing they were doing what was best for her. What will you do? Robert asked quietly. Sarah took a deep breath, visibly trying to compose herself. What can I do? I can't force him to let me care for him, to let me be his wife through this. He's already made up his mind. I'm so sorry, Sarah, Robert said again, wishing he could do more, say more, somehow ease her pain. The thing is, Sarah continued, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper, part of me understands. He wants to spare me, to be remembered as he is now, not as the shell of himself he'll become. But another part of me feels like this is just another person I love choosing to leave me. The words twisted like a knife in Robert's chest. Like I did, he said quietly. Sarah looked at him, her eyes still bright with tears. Yes, like you did. I failed you, Robert admitted. In every way a husband can fail a wife. I was selfish, arrogant, blind to what really mattered. And I've regretted it every day since. Why are you telling me this now? Sarah asked, a hint of that old hurt in her voice. Because I need you to know that what happened wasn't your fault. It wasn't because you weren't enough or because there was something wrong with you. It was my failure, my mistake. Robert took a deep breath. And because I need you to know that not everyone leaves. Some people come back if you'll let them. Sarah studied his face, seeming to search for something in his expression. What exactly are you saying, Robert? I'm saying that I'm here for you, Sarah. As your friend, as your partner in the foundation work, as whatever you need me to be. I'm not going anywhere this time. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. Thomas thinks I'm still in love with you, she finally said, the statement hanging in the air between them. Robert's heart skipped a beat. And what do you think? He asked carefully. Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with conflicting emotions. I think I never fully stopped loving you, Robert. Even when I hated you for what you did, even when I thought I'd moved on with Thomas. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm married to a good man who's facing a terrible illness. I would never ask you to betray your marriage vows, Robert said quickly. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? Sarah asked, not accusingly but with genuine curiosity. Robert took a deep breath. Because I want to make amends. Because I want to be there for you during this difficult time. Because... He hesitated, then continued with complete honesty, because I never stopped loving you either, Sarah. But I respect your marriage and your commitment to Thomas. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, absorbing his words. I don't know what happens next, she finally said. Thomas is making decisions about our future without consulting me. You're back in my life after 5 years. Everything is complicated. It is, Robert agreed. But you don't have to figure it all out today. Right now, you just need to focus on being there for Thomas, and I'll support you however I can, as a friend, as a colleague, nothing more. Sarah nodded, seemingly relieved by his understanding. Thank you. That's exactly what I need right now. As they made their way back toward the hospital, Robert felt an odd mix of emotions, sorrow for Thomas and Sarah's situation, guilt over his role in Sarah's past pain, but also a small, persistent hope that had been kindled by her admission that she had never stopped loving him. Whatever happened next, Robert was determined to be patient, to be supportive, to be the man Sarah deserved, not the selfish, arrogant person he had been during their marriage. Thomas's diagnosis was tragic, but it had also clarified what truly mattered in life. And for Robert, that meant being there for Sarah, however she needed him, without expectations or demands. Time would tell what the future held for all of them. For now, it was enough to walk beside her, sharing her burden in whatever small way he could. What do you think? He asked softly. Sarah looked away, her gaze fixed on the hospital building. I think I never fully stopped loving you, Robert. Even when I hated you for what you did, even when I thought I'd moved on with Thomas. There was always a part of my heart that belonged to you, Sarah. Robert began, but she held up a hand to stop him. But that doesn't mean we can just pick up where we left off. Too much has happened. I'm still married to Thomas, and regardless of his decisions about his care, I made vows to him that I intend to honor. He needs me now, even if he doesn't want to admit it. Robert nodded, respecting her loyalty even as hope flickered in his chest. I understand. I'm not asking for anything, Sarah. I just want you to know that I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. Thank you, she whispered. Right now that's what I need most, someone who stays. As they sat there together, the autumn breeze stirring the leaves around them, Robert felt something shift between them. Not a rekindling of their old relationship, but perhaps the foundation for something new, something built on a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. Whatever the future held, he would be there for her, without expectations, without demands. It was the least he could do, and perhaps someday it might be enough. The winter snow blanketed the city in white as Robert reviewed the final plans for the Pediatric Research Center. The fundraising had been extraordinarily successful, exceeding their goals by nearly $20 million. Construction would begin in the spring, with the facility expected to open in 18 months. It had been 3 weeks since Thomas had departed for his world tour alone, as he had insisted, despite Sarah's pleas. 3 weeks during which Robert had watched Sarah throw herself into her work with the foundation, keeping busy from dawn until well past dusk, as if afraid to stop moving, to be alone with her thoughts and feelings. They had settled into a rhythm of sorts, working together during the day, occasionally sharing dinner to discuss foundation business, carefully maintaining the boundaries of friendship despite the undercurrent of deeper feelings that neither could fully deny. Robert's phone chimed with a message from Sarah. Need to talk. Can you meet at the coffee shop near the office in 30 minutes? Of course, he replied, concern immediately rising. Sarah rarely asked to meet outside their regular schedule these days. 30 minutes later, Robert found Sarah at a corner table in the cozy coffee shop, 2 steaming mugs already in front of her. She looked up as he approached, and he was struck by the tension in her face. What's wrong? He asked as he sat down across from her. Sarah pushed one of the coffee mugs toward him. I got a call from Thomas's doctor in Geneva. Thomas collapsed in his hotel room last night. The disease is progressing much faster than they expected. Is he all right? Robert asked, genuinely concerned. For now. He's stable, but the doctor says this is just the beginning. The decline will be rapid from here. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she held her coffee. The doctor wants me to come to Switzerland. He says Thomas is asking for me. But I thought Thomas didn't want you there, Robert said carefully. He didn't? But apparently he's changed his mind. Sarah looked up at Robert, her eyes filled with conflict. I need to go to him, Robert. Despite everything, despite his pushing me away, he's my husband. Of course you do, Robert said without hesitation. When do you leave? There's a flight tonight. I've already booked it. Robert nodded, pushing down the selfish disappointment that rose within him. What about the foundation? The research center? That's what I wanted to talk to you about, Sarah said. I don't know how long I'll be gone. Weeks, maybe months. Someone needs to keep things running here to make sure the project stays on track. Don't worry about that, Robert assured her. I'll handle everything. The foundation, the hospital board, the research center, all of it. You just focus on Thomas. Relief flickered across Sarah's face. Thank you. I knew I could count on you. Always, Robert said, meaning it. There's something else, Sarah said, reaching into her bag and pulling out a thick envelope. Thomas's lawyer delivered this to me this morning. It's from Thomas, to be opened, in the event of his incapacitation. I haven't read it yet, but there's a note on the front asking me to share it with you. She slid the envelope across the table. Robert looked at it with surprise. With me? Why? I don't know. But Thomas was very specific, according to the lawyer. He wanted both of us to read it together. Robert hesitated, then picked up the envelope. Do you want to open it now? Sarah nodded, her expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Yes, before I leave. Robert carefully opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. On top was a letter, written in Thomas's precise handwriting. He began to read aloud. My dearest Sarah and Robert, if you are reading this, then my condition has deteriorated sooner than I had hoped. There are things I need to tell you both, truths I've been holding back. Sarah, you know now about my diagnosis, but what you don't know is that I've suspected for some time that your heart has never fully belonged to me. I've seen how you look at Robert, especially since he came back into your life. At first I was jealous, then angry, then simply sad. But ultimately I came to understand that love cannot be forced or contained. It simply is. Robert, when I came to see you that day in your office, I told you part of the truth, about my diagnosis, about Sarah's feelings for you. But I didn't tell you everything. I didn't tell you that I've known from the beginning that Sarah never stopped loving you, that when she agreed to marry me, she was seeking safety and stability after the pain you caused her. She has been a wonderful wife, and I believe she does love me in her way, but not as she loves you. Which brings me to why I'm writing this letter. Inside this envelope you will find legal documents transferring control of my company, Chin Global Solutions, to both of you jointly. Sarah, as my wife, would normally inherit everything, but I believe that the two of you together will be better stewards of my legacy than either of you alone. There is also documentation for a new foundation I've established, the Chin Westfield Foundation for Neurological Research. I've endowed it with $5 billion from my personal fortune. My hope is that this foundation, under your joint leadership, will help find treatments or cures for conditions like mine, so that others might be spared what I am going through. Sarah, my love, please don't feel guilty. Don't sacrifice your chance at happiness out of loyalty to me. By the time you read this, I will no longer be the man you married. I will be fading, my memories and personality slipping away day by day. I don't want you to watch that happen. I want you to remember me as I was, and then I want you to live, fully, joyfully, without regret. Robert, I am entrusting you with my greatest treasure, Sarah's heart. Don't break it again. Be the man she always believed you could be, the man I believe you have become. I leave you both with my blessing, and my hope that you will find together the happiness that circumstances denied you before. Life is too short and love too precious to waste either. With deepest affection and trust, Thomas. Robert lowered the letter, his vision blurred with unexpected tears. Across the table, Sarah was openly crying, her hands covering her mouth. I had no idea, she whispered. All this time he knew, he understood. He's an extraordinary man, Robert said quietly. More generous than I could ever be in his position. Sarah wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. I need to go to him. Whatever he says in this letter, whatever his wishes for us, I need to be with him now. Of course, Robert agreed immediately. That's where you belong right now. Will you come with me? Sarah asked, the question catching Robert completely by surprise. To Switzerland? But Thomas. Thomas wanted us both involved in his care decisions, in the foundation he's created. That's clear from these documents, Sarah said, gesturing to the papers still on the table. And honestly, Robert, I don't think I can face this alone. Robert considered for only a moment before nodding. I'll come. Not to interfere, but to support you, to help however I can. Thank you, Sarah said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. We should leave tonight. There's room on my flight. As they left the coffee shop together to prepare for their journey, Robert marveled at the unexpected turn events had taken. Thomas's selflessness, his clear-eyed understanding of the situation, his generosity in the face of personal tragedy, it was humbling. Robert silently vowed to be worthy of the trust Thomas had placed in him. Not just for Sarah's sake but for Thomas's as well. Whatever happened in Switzerland, whatever the future held for all of them, Robert would honor Thomas's wishes and respect his incredible dignity. The snow continued to fall as they walked to their separate cars, each lost in thought about the journey ahead. Not just the physical journey to Switzerland, but the emotional journey they were all embarking on together. The Swiss clinic was nestled in the Alps, its modern architecture blending surprisingly well with the stunning natural surroundings. Robert stood at the window of the waiting room, gazing out at snow-covered peaks, while Sarah spoke privately with Thomas's doctors. They had arrived in Geneva 2 days ago, exhausted from the long flight but determined to reach Thomas as quickly as possible. To their surprise, he had been lucid and welcoming upon their arrival, greeting Robert with a firm handshake and Sarah with a gentle kiss on the cheek. I knew you'd come, Thomas had said. Both of you. Now, as Robert waited, he reflected on the extraordinary situation they found themselves in. Thomas's letter had changed everything, yet in the 2 days since their arrival, none of them had directly addressed its contents. Instead, they had focused on practical matters, Thomas's care, the details of his condition, the operations of his company in his absence. The door opened and Sarah emerged from the doctor's office, her face pale but composed. How bad is it? Robert asked quietly. Bad? Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. The disease is progressing much faster than typical cases. The doctor says it's a particularly aggressive variant. Thomas may have only months of lucidity left, not the year or two they originally projected. Robert guided her to a set of comfortable chairs in the waiting area. "I'm so sorry, Sarah." "The strange thing is, Thomas seems at peace with it," Sarah said, shaking her head slightly. "He's arranged everything, his care, his business affairs, even us." "We don't have to talk about that part yet," Robert said gently. "No, I think we do," Sarah countered. "Thomas wants to speak with both of us together this afternoon. He was very specific about that." Robert nodded, feeling both apprehension and curiosity about what Thomas might say to them. "Then we'll hear him out." A few hours later, they sat in Thomas's private room in the clinic. It was a spacious, comfortable space that looked more like a hotel suite than a medical facility, with large windows offering the same spectacular mountain views. Thomas sat in an armchair rather than in bed, dressed in casual clothes, looking for all the world like a man on vacation rather than a patient with a terminal diagnosis. "Thank you both for coming," Thomas said, his voice strong and clear. "I know it wasn't an easy decision, especially for you, Robert." "I'm here to support Sarah," Robert said simply. "And you if you'll let me." Thomas smiled. "Always the diplomat. But we need to be honest with each other now. Time has become a luxury I can no longer afford." He turned to Sarah. "You've read my letter?" Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes." "Thomas, I don't know what to say. I never meant to." "I know," Thomas interrupted gently. "You never intended to hurt me. You've been a wonderful wife, Sarah. I have no complaints, no regrets about our marriage." "Then why are you pushing me away?" Sarah asked, the question clearly paining her. "Why won't you let me care for you, stay with you through this?" Thomas looked out at the mountains for a moment before answering. "Because I've seen what this disease does, Sarah. I've watched it happen to others. The person you love disappears piece by piece, replaced by someone who may look the same but isn't. Someone who may not recognize you, who may become angry or frightened or childlike. I don't want that to be your last memory of me." "That should be my choice," Sarah insisted. "Perhaps," Thomas conceded. "But it's also mine. And I've made my decision." He turned to Robert. "Which brings me to why I asked you both here today. I need your help with something important." "Anything," Robert said, meaning it. "The Chin Westfield Foundation I mentioned in my letter. I want it launched immediately, not after I'm gone. I want to see it begin its work. And I want both of you to lead it together." Sarah and Robert exchanged surprised glances. "But what about your company?" Sarah asked. "Your existing projects?" "My executive team will handle the day-to-day operations of Chin Global," Thomas explained. "But the foundation is different. It's my legacy, my hope for the future. I can think of no one better to entrust it to than the two people I care about most in this world." The simplicity and sincerity of his statement left both Sarah and Robert momentarily speechless. "There's something else," Thomas continued. "The foundation's headquarters will be in New York, not here in Switzerland. Which means you'll both need to return there soon to get things started." "You want us to leave?" Sarah asked, hurt evident in her voice. "I want you to live, Sarah," Thomas said gently. "To do meaningful work, to make a difference, to find happiness. Not to sit by my bedside watching me disappear." "I don't know if I can do that," Sarah admitted. "You can," Thomas assured her. "And you will because I'm asking you to. Consider it my last request." The room fell silent, the weight of Thomas's words hanging in the air. Robert looked between the two of them, husband and wife, each trying to do what they thought best for the other, each hurting in their own way. "What if we compromise?" Robert suggested finally. "Sarah and I will return to New York to set up the foundation, but Sarah will come back to visit you regularly. Not as your caretaker but as your wife, to share updates on the foundation's progress, to keep you connected to the world outside this clinic." Thomas considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That could work. As long as Sarah understands that there will come a time when I may not know who she is, when visits will no longer be meaningful." "I understand," Sarah said quietly. "But until then I want to be part of your life, Thomas. Please don't shut me out completely." "Never," Thomas promised, reaching for her hand. "You will always be part of my life, Sarah. Even when I can no longer remember your name." The three of them sat together as the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the mountains stood solid and eternal against the darkening sky, a reminder that some things remained constant even as life changed around them. In that quiet moment, Robert felt a strange sense of peace. Not happiness exactly. The situation was too complex, too layered with both sorrow and hope for simple happiness. But there was a rightness to it, a feeling that despite all the pain and mistakes of the past, they were finally where they needed to be, doing what they needed to do. Thomas had given them both an incredible gift. Not just his fortune or his blessing, but a purpose, a way forward that honored what had been while creating space for what might be. It was up to them now to use that gift wisely, to create something meaningful from it. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting the room in soft golden light, Robert silently promised Thomas that he would not waste this second chance. He would help build a foundation worthy of Thomas's vision, and he would be there for Sarah whatever she needed for as long as she needed him. The future stretched before them, uncertain but full of possibility. And for the first time in a very long time, Robert felt ready to face it. Spring had come to New York, cherry blossoms blooming in Central Park as Robert stood at the podium, addressing the gathered crowd at the official launch of the Chin Westfield Foundation for Neurological Research. Today marks not just the beginning of a foundation, he said, his voice carrying across the attentive audience of scientists, donors, and media, but the continuation of a vision. Thomas Chen's vision of a world where diseases like Alzheimer's no longer rob us of our loved ones, our memories, our very selves. From her seat in the front row, Sarah watched Robert with pride. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of activity. Setting up the foundation's headquarters in a renovated brownstone near the hospital, recruiting top researchers from around the world, establishing partnerships with leading medical institutions. Sarah had kept her promise to Thomas, flying to Switzerland twice a month to spend weekends with him. Each visit was precious, especially as she could see subtle changes in him with each trip, a forgotten name here, a moment of confusion there. Small things still, but harbingers of what was to come. Through this foundation, Robert continued, we will fund groundbreaking research, support innovative clinical trials, and provide resources for families affected by neurological disorders. But perhaps most importantly, we will never give up hope. His eyes met Sarah's briefly and she smiled, encouraging him. Thomas Chin understood something profound about hope, Robert said, his voice softening. He understood that hope is not just wishful thinking, it's action. It's the belief that what we do today matters, that it can change tomorrow for the better. Thomas isn't with us today, but his hope, his vision, is alive in every aspect of this foundation. The audience applauded warmly as Robert concluded his remarks and introduced the foundation's scientific director, a renowned neurologist who had left her position at Johns Hopkins to join their cause. Afterward, as the crowd mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres, Sarah found herself approached by unfamiliar faces offering congratulations and support. She accepted their kind words graciously, but her heart wasn't fully in the celebration. Part of her was in Switzerland with Thomas, wondering if he was having a good day or a bad one, if he was comfortable, if he was afraid. You did wonderfully, Robert said, appearing at her side with a glass of sparkling water for her. Thomas would be proud. I hope so, Sarah said. I just wish he could be here to see it. He is in a way, Robert said gently. Everything about this foundation reflects his values, his vision. Sarah nodded, taking comfort in the thought. I have to catch the red-eye to Geneva tonight, she reminded him. The doctors called yesterday. Thomas has been asking for me. Concern crossed Robert's face. Is he all right? As all right as can be expected, Sarah said. But they think the decline is accelerating. There are more bad days than good now. Robert placed a supportive hand on her arm. Do you want me to come with you? Sarah considered the offer. Robert had accompanied her on her first few visits back to Switzerland, but had stopped joining her recently, sensing that she needed private time with Thomas. But this visit felt different, more significant somehow. Yes, she decided. I think Thomas would like that. And honestly, I could use the support. The flight to Geneva that night was quiet, both Sarah and Robert lost in their own thoughts. They had developed a comfortable camaraderie over the past months, working closely on the foundation, sharing meals, occasionally attending fundraising events together. But they had been careful to maintain boundaries, mindful of Sarah's marriage and Thomas's condition. The Swiss clinic was bathed in early morning light when they arrived. The head doctor met them in the lobby, his expression grave. Mr. Chin has been asking for both of you, he said. He's having a lucid day which is becoming rare. But I must prepare you, physically, he has declined significantly since your last visit, Mrs. Chin. Sarah nodded, steeling herself for what was to come. Robert stayed close beside her as they followed the doctor to Thomas's room. Nothing could have prepared Sarah for the change in her husband. In just 2 weeks since her last visit, Thomas seemed to have aged years. His face was gaunt, his once vibrant eyes sunken, his hands trembling slightly where they rested on the blanket. But when he saw them, his face lit up with recognition. A precious gift that Sarah knew might soon be taken from them. "Sarah," he said, his voice weaker than before but still distinctly Thomas. "And Robert, you came." "Of course we came," Sarah said, moving to his bedside and taking his hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like a man running out of time," Thomas replied with unexpected honesty. "Which is why I needed to see you both." Robert moved closer to the bed. "We're here, Thomas. Whatever you need." Thomas looked between them, a shadow of his old perceptiveness in his gaze. "The foundation launch. Was it successful?" "Very," Sarah assured him. "We've already received additional pledges of over 500 million. And we've assembled an incredible team of researchers." "Good," Thomas said, seeming satisfied. "That's good." He paused, gathering his strength. "I need to tell you both something important while I still can." Sarah squeezed his hand encouragingly. "We're listening." "I'm not going to get better," Thomas said simply. "We all know that. But lately the decline has been rapid. The doctors say I may have only weeks of lucidity left, not months." Sarah fought back tears. "Thomas? It's all right," he said gently. "I've made peace with it. But there's something I need from both of you." "Anything," Robert said immediately. "I need you to let me go," Thomas said, his gaze steady despite his weakened state. "When the time comes, and it's coming soon, I need you to return to New York, to your lives, to the foundation. Remember me as I was, not as I will become." "I can't just abandon you," Sarah protested, tears now flowing freely. "You won't be," Thomas assured her. "I won't know the difference, Sarah. That's the cruelty and the mercy of this disease. Soon I won't recognize you, won't know who you are or what we meant to each other." "But I'll know," Sarah whispered. "Yes," Thomas acknowledged. "You will. And that's why I'm asking you, while I still can, to promise me you'll live your life fully when I'm gone. Not just physically, but in every way." His gaze shifted meaningfully between Sarah and Robert. "Thomas," Robert began, uncomfortable, "this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Thomas interrupted with surprising firmness. "I see how you look at each other. I see what's still there between you, what never died. And I want you to know that you have my blessing." Sarah looked at Robert, then back at Thomas, torn between denial and honesty. "Thomas, I love you. I've been faithful to you in every way." "I know," Thomas said, a gentle smile on his thin face. "Your loyalty has never been in question. But your heart has always been divided. And soon you'll need to make a choice about your future." He turned to Robert. "You've become a better man, Robert. I've watched you these past months, your dedication to the foundation, your support of Sarah, your respect for my wishes. You've earned my trust." "I don't know what to say," Robert admitted, deeply moved by Thomas's words. "Say you'll take care of her," Thomas said simply. "Say you'll help her move forward when I'm gone." "I will," Robert promised solemnly. "For as long as she'll let me." Thomas nodded, satisfied, then turned back to Sarah. "And you, my love? Promise me you won't let guilt or misplaced loyalty keep you from finding happiness again." Sarah could barely speak through her tears. "Thomas, please. Promise me," he insisted gently. "I promise," she finally whispered, bringing his hand to her lips. "But not yet. Not while you're still here." "No," Thomas agreed. "Not yet." They spent the day with Thomas, sharing stories, discussing the foundation, sometimes simply sitting in companionable silence. It was, in many ways, a perfect day, a gift that Thomas had somehow managed to give them despite his condition. As evening fell, Thomas grew tired. The doctor came in to administer his medications, suggesting that Sarah and Robert return to their hotel and come back in the morning. "Tomorrow," Thomas murmured as they prepared to leave. "We'll talk more tomorrow." But when they returned the next morning, Thomas didn't recognize them. He looked at Sarah with polite confusion, at Robert with vague suspicion. The Thomas they knew, brilliant, perceptive, generous Thomas, had slipped away in the night, replaced by a frightened stranger who shared his face. The doctor took them aside, explaining that this dramatic overnight decline sometimes happened with this form of Alzheimer's, a sudden, irreversible loss of cognitive function following a period of relative lucidity. "Will he ever recognize us again?" Sarah asked, her heart breaking. "There may be brief moments of recognition, windows of clarity," the doctor explained gently. "But they will be increasingly rare. I'm sorry, Mrs. Chin, but yesterday may have been your last meaningful conversation with your husband." The realization hit Sarah with crushing force. Thomas had known, somehow, that his time was running out. He had gathered his strength for one final day of clarity, one last chance to say what needed to be said. And in doing so, he had given them permission to say goodbye, to begin the process of letting go. That night, in the quiet of her hotel room, Sarah wept for the husband she had already lost, though his body still lived. For the brilliant mind now fractured, for the kind soul now trapped in confusion and fear. And for the love that, while never the grand passion she had once known with Robert, had been steady, respectful, and true. Down the hall, Robert sat on the balcony of his own room, looking out at the distant mountains glowing in the moonlight. Thomas's words echoed in his mind, his trust, his blessing, his clear-eyed understanding of what existed between Robert and Sarah. It was a generosity that humbled Robert, that made him more determined than ever to be worthy of Thomas's faith in him. Not just for Sarah's sake, but for Thomas's legacy. The foundation that would now be their shared purpose, their way of honoring the man who had changed both their lives forever. In the stillness of the Swiss night, a chapter was ending. But perhaps, when the time was right, another might begin. The seasons turned, summer giving way to fall, fall to winter, winter to spring, and then summer once more. A full year had passed since that last lucid day with Thomas in Switzerland. Sarah stood at the window of her New York apartment, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in gold and pink. On the coffee table behind her lay the letter that had arrived that morning, a simple, compassionate notification from the Swiss clinic that Thomas had passed peacefully in his sleep. After months of existing in a limbo where Thomas was physically present but mentally gone, there was finally closure. The buzzer sounded, breaking into her thoughts. Robert had texted earlier, asking if she wanted company tonight. She had been grateful for the offer. The thought of being alone with her conflicted emotions had been overwhelming. Sarah buzzed him up, then took a moment to splash cold water on her face in the bathroom. The face that looked back at her from the mirror was changed from a year ago. There were new lines around her eyes, a gravity to her expression that hadn't been there before. But there was strength there too, hard-won through months of grief and growth. When she opened the door to Robert, he held a small bouquet of white roses, simple, elegant, appropriate for the occasion. Not romantic but thoughtful. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, accepting the flowers. "And for these. How are you doing?" Robert asked as he followed her into the apartment. "I'm not sure," Sarah admitted. Sad, of course, but also relieved in a way. That his suffering is over. Robert nodded in understanding. "That's natural. You've been grieving him for a long time already." "Yes," Sarah agreed, arranging the roses in a vase. "In many ways I said goodbye to the real Thomas a year ago." They moved to the living room, sitting in the comfortable silence that had developed between them over the past year. They had worked side by side nearly every day at the foundation, which had already made remarkable progress, funding 3 promising research trials, establishing support programs for families affected by neurological disorders, hosting a global symposium that had brought together the world's leading experts in the field. Through it all, they had maintained a careful friendship, respectful of Sarah's marriage and her grief. Robert had dated occasionally, brief relationships that never seemed to develop into anything serious. Sarah had remained focused on the foundation and on her monthly visits to Switzerland, even after Thomas no longer knew who she was. "The memorial service will be next week," Sarah said. "Thomas's lawyer called earlier. They've already received condolence messages from around the world, business leaders, medical researchers, even the president." "He touched many lives," Robert observed. "Yes, he did," Sarah agreed, a sad smile touching her lips. "He was a good man, Robert. One of the best I've ever known." "I know," Robert said quietly. "I admired him enormously." They sat in silence for a while longer as darkness fell over the city. Sarah didn't bother turning on the lights, finding comfort in the soft twilight filling the room. "Do you remember what Thomas said to us that last day when he still knew us?" Sarah finally asked. "Every word," Robert said softly. "He gave us his blessing," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "To find happiness, to be together if that's what we wanted." Robert looked at her, his eyes serious in the dim light. "He did. But Sarah, you don't owe him that. You don't owe me anything. Whatever happens next should be because it's what you truly want, not because you feel obligated to fulfill Thomas's wishes." "I know," Sarah said. "And I've thought about it. A lot. Especially these past few months, as it became clear that Thomas's time was running out." "And?" Robert asked, his voice carefully neutral. Sarah turned to face him fully. "And I realized that life is precious and unpredictable. That holding back from happiness out of fear or guilt doesn't honor Thomas's memory. It contradicts everything he wanted for me." "What are you saying, Sarah?" Robert asked, hope and uncertainty mingling in his voice. I'm saying that I've never stopped loving you, Robert. Even when I thought I hated you, even when I was happy with Thomas, there was always a part of my heart that belonged to you. And I'm tired of fighting it. Robert moved closer to her on the sofa, taking her hands in his. I love you, Sarah. I always have, even when I was too blind and selfish to realize what that meant. But are you sure this is what you want? Now, with Thomas only just gone? Thomas has been gone for a year, Sarah said gently. This past year has been about honoring his wishes, caring for him as best I could, and yes, grieving him. But it's also been about healing, about finding my way forward. She squeezed his hands. I'm not saying we should rush anything. I'm still processing everything that's happened. But I don't want to pretend anymore that there isn't something between us, something real and deep and worth exploring when the time is right. When the time is right, Robert repeated, nodding in understanding. We have all the time in the world, Sarah. I'm not going anywhere. I know, she said, a genuine smile breaking through her sorrow for the first time that day. That's one of the things I love about the man you've become, Robert. You stay. You don't run when things get difficult. I learned that lesson the hard way, Robert admitted. But I'll never forget it again. As they sat together in the deepening darkness, a sense of possibility seemed to fill the room. Not happiness, not yet. There was still too much grief, too much healing needed for that. But hope, perhaps. Hope for a future that might, in time, bring joy again. Thomas had given them more than his blessing, more than his fortune, more even than the foundation that bore their names alongside his. He had given them perspective, a profound understanding of what truly mattered in life, love, compassion, and the courage to begin again even after loss. Outside, the stars began to appear, tiny points of light in the vast darkness. Inside, two souls who had found their way back to each other sat in quiet contemplation of all that had been lost, and all that might still be found. 1 year later. The summer sun shone brilliantly as Sarah stood at the podium, addressing the gathered crowd at the grand opening of the Thomas Chin Memorial Wing of the Children's Hospital. Behind her, the sleek modern building gleamed, its innovative design incorporating healing gardens, natural light, and state-of-the-art medical technology. Today we fulfill a promise, Sarah began, her voice strong and clear. A promise made years ago to a little girl who lost her mother too soon. A promise carried forward by a remarkable man who understood the power of legacy, of healing, of hope. Sarah glanced to her right, where Robert stood with the hospital board members, his presence a steady support as it had been throughout the past 2 years. Thomas Chin saw a need and met it with generosity and vision, she continued. This wing will serve thousands of children for generations to come. It will ease suffering, advance research, and perhaps most importantly, it will offer hope to families facing their darkest hours. As Sarah spoke, she thought about her own journey through darkness to light. The past 2 years had been a time of profound loss, but also of unexpected growth and healing. Thomas's passing had left a void, but it had also freed her from the limbo of watching someone she loved slowly disappear. After the memorial service, which had been attended by hundreds of people whose lives Thomas had touched, Sarah had thrown herself into the foundation work with renewed purpose. The Chin Westfield Foundation was now recognized globally as a leading funder of neurological research, with 3 promising treatment protocols and clinical trials. And through it all, Robert had been there, steady, supportive, patient. Their relationship had evolved slowly, respectfully, mindful of Sarah's grief and the shadow of their past. They had begun officially dating 6 months after Thomas's passing, once Sarah felt ready to open her heart again. In so many ways, this hospital wing represents the best of what we can be when we come together for a common purpose, Sarah continued her speech. It reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there is light to be found, in community, in purpose, in the belief that we can make tomorrow better than today. As she concluded her remarks and the ceremonial ribbon was cut, applause filled the air. Sarah stepped back from the podium, immediately finding Robert at her side. That was beautiful, he said softly, squeezing her hand. Thomas would be proud. I think he would be, Sarah agreed, returning the pressure of his hand. Later, as they walked through the completed hospital wing during the reception, Sarah marveled at how perfectly the design had come together. The colorful murals designed to delight young patients, the family spaces that offered comfort during difficult times, the research facilities that would push the boundaries of pediatric medicine. It's everything my mother would have wanted, she said to Robert as they paused by a window overlooking the healing garden. And everything Thomas envisioned. And you made it happen, Robert reminded her. Your vision guided all of this. Sarah smiled, acknowledging his words with a nod. We all did. The foundation, the hospital board, you. She turned to face him fully. I couldn't have done this without you, Robert. Yes, you could have, he contradicted gently. You're the strongest person I know, Sarah. But I'm glad I could be part of it. As the reception wound down, they made their excuses and slipped away. They had dinner reservations at a small restaurant they had discovered together, a place that had become special to them over the past year. Once seated at their favorite corner table, Robert seemed unusually nervous, fidgeting with his napkin, starting sentences and then stopping. Is everything all right? Sarah asked, concerned by his uncharacteristic behavior. Yes, Robert said quickly. Everything is perfect actually. Which is why. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sarah's breath caught as she realized what was happening. I had planned an elaborate speech, Robert said with a self-deprecating smile. About second chances and redemption and how much I love you. But looking at you now, I realize that what I most want to say is simple. Sarah, you are the love of my life. You always have been. Even when I was too foolish to recognize it. He opened the box, revealing not a traditional diamond engagement ring, but a simple platinum band with a small sapphire. The color of her mother's eyes, the color she had once told him she associated with trust and truth. I know we've traveled a difficult road to get here, Robert continued. And I know that Thomas will always hold a special place in your heart. But if you're willing, I'd like to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of a place there too. Sarah looked at the ring, then at Robert's face, so different from the arrogant CEO who had left her 5 years ago. There was humility there now, and wisdom, and a depth of love that took her breath away. I'm not asking you to forget the past, Robert said softly. I'm asking if we can build a future together, on a foundation of all we've learned, all we've lost, all we've found again. Tears filled Sarah's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Robert. I would like that very much. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Sarah felt a sense of rightness, of completion. Their journey had been long and painful, marked by mistakes and regrets, but also by growth and forgiveness and ultimately by love that had survived despite everything. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand along the river, the city lights reflecting on the water, Sarah thought about Thomas, his generosity, his wisdom, his final gift to both of them. She liked to think he was somewhere, somehow, smiling at the happiness he had helped make possible. What are you thinking about? Robert asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. About circles, Sarah replied. How life sometimes brings us back to where we began but changed. Wiser. Better prepared to appreciate what we have. Robert nodded in understanding. We've both come full circle, haven't we? Back to each other but as different people. Yes, Sarah agreed. And I think that's why it will work this time. Because we're not the same people who failed before. We've learned what matters. We've learned how to love better. Robert wrapped his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close as they continued their walk. The summer night was warm, the stars bright overhead, the future stretching before them, not perfect perhaps, but full of promise, full of hope, full of second chances redeemed. To new beginnings, Robert said softly. And to remembering what brought us here, Sarah added. All of it, the good and the bad, the joy and the pain. It's all part of our story. As they turned toward home, their home now, a place they had chosen together, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. The path had been winding and sometimes treacherous, but it had led them exactly where they needed to be. Together, wiser, ready to build a life that honored the past while embracing the future. In the end, that was the greatest love story of all. Not one of perfect people or fairy tale romance, but of real human beings learning, growing, and choosing each other despite having seen the worst and the best that each had to offer. A love tested by fire, tempered by time, and ultimately stronger for all it had endured.